World War I, a time of destruction and pain. To think one man's death could have created this all. World War I, also a time for innovation and ideas. Things such as toxic gas, trench warfare, and many others. But one innovation has proved itself and is still strongly being used today.
Hello and welcome to yesterday's Inventions Today. I'll be your host, James Watson, and today I've seen that we're going to be learning about tanks, and I'm really sorry for the noise behind me. That's just an M1A1 Abrams tank, actually the 21st century's most powerful tank out there. Before we start talking about the past and how tanks were created, let's see tanks today. This is the Abrams M1A1. This hunk of metal costs approximately $2.21 million. It is approximately 70 tons of weight, and it has the most up-to-date weaponry on it. It has a 105mm rifle, and also it has a 50 caliber heavy machine gun. Its engine, a Honeywell AGT 1500C. And finally, to top everything off, its speed is 56 kilometers per hour on road. Hello and welcome back to the show. So right now we just saw an amazing M1A1 Abrams tank, and obviously this is in the present. We want to learn more about how tanks begun and how really they were put into warfare in around World War I, and we're gonna learn all that from Vladimir Dorkovich next. Vladimir, you're up. Hello and welcome. My name is Vladimir Dorkovich, and today I will be telling you about the tank and how it was made and where the ideal concept came from. A lot of people think that the tank was generally made and was thought of by Lancelot de Mol, but actually this is a false claim. The real idea came from the one, his name Leonardo da Vinci, and he was an artist, a scientist, and he was also an inventor. And here, as you can see, here are some of his drawings. And basically what happened is that later on, the inventor Lancelot de Mol, he took these ideas, and in 1912 and 1914 and 1916 he started to make what was called the modern day tank. And mainly the tank was an amazing creation made just to defeat the problems of trench warfare, because the armies, they needed a weaponry which could cross such trenches and would have a durability level. And basically, in terms of World War I, we could see that the first what was used was by the British people. They were the one who made it first. So the British people, they were the one who first created it, as I said, and they created this in Great Britain, and William Foster and Co. in August and September 1915. And the first of all, the British, they created a prototype Mark I tank, which was demonstrated at the British Army on February 2nd, 1916. And later on, the French were not too far behind in World War I, and they also wanted to create their own tanks, and they made their first tank in April 1917. And on the other hand, we see that the Germans, they were not really focused on creating a tank, but they were more looking for anti-tank material to destroy both the British and the French tanks. But they did create only about 20 of their own A75 tanks. Thank you, Vladimir. Now we are going to have Randy Holston at the Institute of Tankology in Massachusetts, and he's going to be telling us more about these three amazing tanks. Hi, my name is Randy Horton, and I'll be first of all showing you guys the three main tanks in World War One. So first of all, we're going to start off with the British Mark 1 tank. The British Mark 1 tank was highly feared in the battlefield due to its enormity and its most powerfulness. So just imagine yourself, you're a soldier and you've dug these trenches which are supposed to protect you for days and days, and this tank comes out of nowhere and in a matter of minutes it crushes these trenches and would obviously kill you. And also, due to many of the soldiers coming through propaganda and not really having any proper training, they would never expect such an enormous and powerful machine to be on the battlefield. Next up, we have the French Renault FT light tank. The German A7V tank was a very powerful tank, just like the British Mark 1 tank, and it had a very square body. And as already said, the Germans were basically focusing more on to eliminate the other tanks on the battlefield, so they didn't go too much in terms of designing their own tank. It was a very simplistic design of just being approximately just a regular old rectangle. Finally, we have the German A7V tank. The German A7V tank was a very powerful tank, just like the British Mark 1 tank, and it had a very square body. And as already said, the Germans were basically focusing more on to eliminate the other tanks on the battlefield, so they didn't go too much in terms of designing their own tank. It was a very simplistic design of just being approximately just a regular old rectangle. But it was very powerful, it was very large, which intimidated other soldiers on the battlefield, which really made it a top contender in the tanks. For the past 7 minutes, we've been learning about how tanks were used in the beginning of World War, but now we're going to learn how the nations, the different countries, started to develop their tanks in a way, and how they perfected the tank near the end of World War. At the end of the World War, you would probably think that the tanks would be highly advanced, but what tended to happen is actually that was not the case. Really, what happened is that at the end of World War, most of the British and the Germans and the French, they did not highly advance their weapons, but at the end, the tank that was highly advanced by the end was actually indeed the smallest tank, the Renault FT-17 French tank, and that is the tank that stood out by the end. Thank you, that was just absolutely amazing. We really learned a lot about tanks today and how they really infiltrated and affected World War One. And in general, what we learned was that the three main countries which used the tank were the British, the French, and the Germans. The British had made their Mark V tank, and this was actually one of the most higher class tanks that were used in World War One. Then on the other hand, we had the French, which had a smaller tank. It was very compact, but at the end it looked more towards the modern era of war. And finally, we had the Germans, who weren't really looking towards building tanks and using tanks in warfare, but were looking to make anti-tank materials and weaponry to shoot down tanks. But they still created their own tank, which was an amazing, strong, well-built tank. And by the end, we actually learned a lot. And that's the end of this episode. Thank you for watching, and hope you guys learned a lot. And just signing off.